Okay, hi. Today I'm going to read to you some quotes by the anti-marital abuse author Lundy Bancroft. I'm like a super big fan of his. He's like one of my favorite nonfiction authors. And he just really takes the punch against abusive behavior and mentality. And he actually used to counsel abusers for like 20 years. So he knows just what makes them tick. And it makes him really unique among all the other anti-abuse authors because he like directly talks to them and knows what they're thinking. So I'm going to read to you a bunch of quotes from him, and it could help you, it could help someone in your life. It could even help you understand, abuse in general, which can include oppression, racism, sexism. All that stuff is really just abuse, only on a macro level. So I'm going to read to you a bunch of his quotes because they're really awesome. Are you afraid of him? Are you getting distant from friends or family because he is making those relationships difficult? Is your level of energy and motivation declining, or do you feel depressed? Is your self-opinion declining so that you are always fighting to be good enough and to prove yourself? Do you find yourself constantly preoccupied with the relationship and how to fix it? Do you feel like you can't do anything right? Do you feel like the problems in your relationship are all your fault? Do you repeatedly leave arguments feeling like you've been messed with but can't figure out exactly why? By Lundy Bancroft. Assessing dangerousness in men who abuse women. He has a history of severe or very frequent violence towards her or towards other individuals such as past partners. He follows her, monitors her whereabouts, or uses high-tech means to keep tabs on her or stalks her in other ways. He knows where she lives and works, knows names and addresses of her friends and relatives, or is very familiar with her daily routines. She is taking steps to end the relationship or has already done so. He was violent to her during a pregnancy. There are stepchildren involved. He has threatened to kill her or to hurt her severely, has strangled her, or has threatened her with a weapon, including making verbal reference to using a weapon, even if he did not actually brandish it. He has threatened to kill the children or the whole family. He has access to weapons or he is familiar with their use. He's depressed, suicidal, or shows signs of not caring what happens to him. He has, for example, threatened to kill himself if she leaves him. He's unemployed. He isn't close to anyone, and no current relationships with friends or relatives are important to him. He has a significant criminal history, or he has a history of using violence or threatening violence against other people. He abuses alcohol or drugs heavily, especially if his habits involve daily or nearly daily intoxication. Excuse me. He has been violent to children. He has killed or in other ways been violent to pets or has used other terror tactics. He uses pornography heavily or has a history of perpetrating sexual violence or degradation against his partner or others. He has exhibited extreme behaviors when his current partner or past partners have made attempts to leave him. Next quote. No one can lose his or her right to be respected. I emphasize this point because of the number of times I've heard an abusive man say about his partner, "I can't respect her because she's not worthy of respect." In other words, he has convinced himself that she is disgusting so he can treat her however he feels like treating her. But the only thing disgusting is his behavior. All human beings are worthy of respect. By Lundy Bancroft. When we view another person with respect, we recognize that the person is just as fully human as we are. We see that person as equal to us in value. This is the most critical point of all. We also recognize that the person has important strengths and capabilities, even if we don't know what they are. We just take it for granted that they are present inside the person. Finally, we recognize that the person suffers pain just like anyone else. Next quote. Abuse and respect are opposites. You can't respect a partner that you abuse. The destructive man may insist over and over again that he respects his partner, but if he did, he wouldn't treat her in the demeaning and unfair ways that he does. The scars from mental cruelty can be as deep and long-lasting as wounds from punches or slaps, but are often not as obvious. In fact, even among women who have experienced violence from a partner, half or more report that the man's emotional abuse is what is causing them the greatest harm. Has he ever trapped you in a room and not let you out? Has he ever raised a fist at you as if he were going to hit you? Has he ever thrown an object that hit you or nearly did? Has he ever held you down or grabbed you to restrain you? Has he ever shoved, poked, or grabbed you? Has he ever threatened to hurt you? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, we can stop wondering whether he'll ever be violent. He already has been. How can I tell if a man I'm seeing will become abusive? Ding! He speaks disrespectfully about his former partners. Ding! He is disrespectful toward you. Ding! He does favors for you that you don't want or puts on such a show of generosity that it makes you uncomfortable. Ding! He is controlling. Ding! He is possessive. Ding! He is self-centered. Ding! Nothing is ever his fault. Ding! He abuses drugs or alcohol. Ding! He pressures you for sex. Ding! He gets serious too quickly about the relationship. Ding! He intimidates you when he's angry. Ding! He has double standards. Ding! He has negative attitudes towards women. Ding! He treats you differently around other people. And ding! He appears to be attracted to vulnerability. It is important to note that research has shown that men who have abusive mothers do not tend to develop especially negative attitudes towards females, but men who have abusive fathers do. The disrespect that abusive men show their female partners and their daughters is often absorbed by their sons. So while a small number of abusive men do hate women, the great majority exhibit a more subtle, though often quite pervasive, sense of superiority or contempt towards females, and some don't show any obvious signs of problems with women at all until they're in a serious relationship. There certainly are some women who treat their male partners badly, berating them, calling them names, attempting to control them. The negative impact on these men's lives can be considerable. But do we see men whose self-esteem is gradually destroyed through this process? Do we see men whose progress in school or in their careers grinds to a halt because of the constant criticism and undermining? Where are the men whose partners are forcing them to have unwanted sex? Where are the men who are fleeing to shelters in fear for their lives? How about the ones who try to get to a phone to call for help, but the women block their way or cut the line? The reason we don't generally see these men is simple. They're rare. When a man starts my program, he often says, "I'm here because I lose control of myself sometimes. I need to get a better grip." I always correct him. Your problem is not that you lose control of yourself. It's that you take control of your partner. In order to change, you don't need to gain control over yourself. You need to let go of control of her. Disrespect can also take the form of idealizing you and putting you on a pedestal as a perfect woman or goddess, perhaps treating you like a piece of fine china. The man who worships you in this way is not seeing you, he is seeing his fantasy, and when you fail to live up to that image, he may turn nasty. So there may not be much difference between the man who talks down to you and the one who elevates you. Both are displaying a failure to respect you as a real human being and bode ill. The myths about abusers. 1. He was abused as a child. 2. His previous partner hurt him. 3. He abuses those he loves the most. 4. He holds in his feelings too much. 5. He has an aggressive personality. 6. He loses control. 7. He's too angry. 8. He's mentally ill. 9. He hates women. 10. He's afraid of intimacy and abandonment. 11. He has low self-esteem. 12. His boss mistreats him. 13. He has poor skills in communication and conflict resolution. 14. There are as many abusive women as abusive men. 15. His abusiveness is as bad for him as it is for his partner. 16. He's a victim of racism. 17. He abuses alcohol or drugs. Abusive men come in every personality type, arise from good childhoods or bad ones, are macho men or gentle liberated men. No psychological test can distinguish an abusive man from a respectful one. Abusiveness is not a product of a man's emotional injuries or of deficits in his skills. In reality, abuse springs from a man's early cultural training, his key male role models, and his peer influences. In other words, abuse is a problem of values, not of psychology. When someone challenges an abuser's attitudes and beliefs, he tends to reveal the contemptuous and insulting personality that normally stays hidden, reserved for private attacks on his partner. An abuser tries to keep everybody, his partner, his therapist, his friends, and relatives, focused on how he feels so that they won't focus on how he thinks. Perhaps because on some level he is aware that if you grasp the true nature of his problem, you will begin to escape his domination. When a man's face contorts in bitterness and hatred, he looks a little insane. When his mood changes from elated to assaultive in the time it takes to turn around, his mental stability seems open to question. When he accuses his partner of plotting to harm him, he seems paranoid. It is no wonder that the partner of an abusive man would come to suspect that he was mentally ill. Yet the great majority of my clients over the years have been psychologically normal. Their minds work logically, they understand cause and effect, they don't hallucinate. Their perceptions of most life circumstances are reasonably accurate. They get good reports at work, they do well in school or training programs, and no one other than their partners and children thinks there's anything wrong with them. Their value system is unhealthy, not their psychology. Alcohol does not change a person's fundamental value system. People's personalities, when intoxicated, even though somewhat altered, still bear some relationship to who they are when sober. When you're drunk, you may behave in ways that are silly or embarrassing. You might be overly familiar or tactlessly honest, or perhaps careless or forgetful. But do you knock over little old ladies for a laugh? Probably not. Do you sexually assault the clerk at the convenience store? Unlikely. People's conduct while intoxicated continues to be governed by their core foundation of beliefs or attitudes, even though there is some loosening of the structure. Alcohol encourages people to let loose what they have simmering below the surface. Abusers make conscious choices even while intoxicated. The volatile, abusive, and sometimes dangerous reactions that abusers can have when relationships draw to a close have often been considered, especially by psychologists, to be evidence of the man's fear of abandonment. But women have fears of abandonment that are just as great as men's, yet they rarely stalk or kill their partners after a breakup. Not only that, but many abusers are vicious to their ex-partners even when they do not desire a reunion or when they initiated the breakup themselves. It is not possible to be truly balanced in one's views of an abuser and an abused woman. As Dr. Judith Herman explains eloquently in her masterwork Trauma and Recovery, neutrality actually serves the interests of the perpetrator much more than those of the victim, and so is not neutral. Although an abuser prefers to have you wholeheartedly on his side, he will settle contentedly for your decision to take a middle stance. To him, that means that you see the couple's problems as partly her fault and partly his fault, which means it isn't abuse. The confusion of love with abuse is what allows abusers who kill their partners to make the absurd claim that they were driven by the depths of their loving feelings. The news media regrettably often accepts the aggressor's view of these acts, describing them as crimes of passion. But what could more thoroughly prove that a man did not love his partner? If a mother were to kill one of her children, would we ever accept the claim that she did it because she was overwhelmed by how much she cared? Not for an instant, nor should we. Genuine love means respecting the humanity of the other person, wanting what is best for him or her, and supporting the other person's self-esteem and independence. This kind of love is incompatible with abuse and coercion. The abuser's problem is not that he responds inappropriately to conflict. His abusiveness is operating prior to the conflict. It usually creates the conflict and determines the shape the conflict takes. He isn't abusive because he's angry. He's angry because he's abusive. Abuse doesn't come from people's inability to resolve conflicts, but from one person's decision to claim a higher status than another. I've sometimes heard adults telling girls that they should be flattered by boys' invasive or aggressive behavior because it means they really like you. An approach that prepares both boys and girls to confuse love with abuse and socializes girls to feel helpless. If you are aware of chronic or severe mistreatment and do not speak out against it, your silence communicates implicitly that you see nothing unacceptable taking place. Abusers interpret silence as approval, or at least as forgiveness. To abused women, meanwhile, the silence means that no one will help, just what her partner wants her to believe. Anyone who chooses to quietly look the other way, therefore unwittingly becomes the abuser's ally. Boys' aggressiveness is increasingly being treated as a medical problem, particularly in the schools, a trend that has led to the diagnosing and medicating of boys whose problem may really be that they have been traumatized and influenced by exposure to violence and abuse at home. Treating these boys as though they have a chemical problem not only overlooks the distress that they are in, but also reinforces their belief that they are out of control or sick, rather than helping them to recognize that they are making bad choices based on destructive values. Physical aggression by a man toward his partner is abuse, even if it happens only once. Have you ever heard a woman claim that the reason why she's chronically mistreating her male partner is because a previous man abused her? I have never run into this excuse in the 15 years I have worked in the field of abuse. Certainly, I've encountered cases where a woman had trouble trusting another man after leaving an abuser, but there's a critical distinction to be made. Her past experiences may explain how she feels, but they are not an excuse for how she behaves, and the same is true for a man. I have sometimes said to a client, if you're so in touch with your feelings from your abusive childhood, then you should know what abuse feels like. You should be able to remember how miserable it was to be cut down to nothing, to be put in fear, to be told that the abuse is your own fault. You should be less likely to abuse a woman, not more so, from having been through it. Once I make this point, he generally stops mentioning his terrible childhood. He only wants to draw attention to it if it's an excuse to stay the same, not if it's a reason to change. Addiction does not cause partner abuse, and recovery from addiction does not cure partner abuse. Never believe a man's claim that he has to harm his partner in order to protect her. Only abusers think this way. An abusive man who is adept in the language of feelings can make his partner feel crazy by turning each argument into a therapy session in which he puts her reactions under a microscope and assigns himself the role of helping her. He may, for example, explain to her the emotional issues she needs to work through, or analyze her reasons for mistakenly believing he is mistreating her. Friends say he's mean, but she knows many ways in which he has been good to her. Friends say, he treats you that way because he can get away with it. I would never let someone treat me that way. But she knows that the times when she puts her foot down the most firmly, he responds by becoming his angriest and most intimidating. When she stands up to him, he makes her pay for it sooner or later. Friends say, leave him. But she knows it won't be that easy. He'll promise to change. He'll get friends and relatives to feel sorry for him and pressure her to give him another chance. He'll get severely depressed, causing her to worry whether he'll be all right. An abuser doesn't change because he feels guilty or gets sober or finds God. He doesn't change after seeing the fear in his children's eyes or feeling them drift away from him. It doesn't suddenly dawn on him that his partner deserves better treatment. Because of his self-focus, combined with the many rewards he gets from controlling you, an abuser changes only when he has to. So the most important element in creating a context for change in an abuser is placing him in a situation where he has no other choice. Otherwise, it is highly unlikely that he will ever change his behavior. Every aspect of the multi-pronged legal system, even today, is dominated by males. Police, prosecutors, judges, probation officers. In addition, the state legislatures that make the laws are still disproportionately male. So how does the abuser come to the far-fetched conclusion that women are somehow lurking in the shadows, pulling strings to cause him to suffer consequences for his actions when he thinks there shouldn't be any? This absurd leap occurs for two reasons. One is that he already has well-entrenched habits of blaming women for his own behavior. So when society sends him the message that he is responsible for what he does, he just widens the scope of his blame-projecting machine to target all women. The second is that if he didn't blame women, he would have to accept the fact that a large proportion of men are opposed to what he is doing. Cultural values are changing, slowly but surely, and abusers cannot always count on other men to back them up anymore, a fact that makes them feel betrayed, so they close their eyes to it. Most abusive men put on a charming face for their communities, creating a sharp split between their public image and their private treatment of women and children. He may be enraged at home, but calm and smiling outside. Selfish and self-centered with you, but generous and supportive with others. Domineering at home, but willing to negotiate and compromise outside. Highly negative about females while on his own turf, but a vocal supporter of equality when anyone else is listening. Assaultive towards his partner or children, but non-violent and non-threatening with everyone else. Entitled at home, but critical of other men who disrespect or assault women. The pain of this contrast can eat away at a woman. The gentleman style of abuser tends to be highly self-centered and demanding of emotional catering. He may not be the man who has a fit because a dinner is late, but rather erupts because of some way his partner failed to sacrifice her own needs or interests to keep him content. He plays up how fragile he is to divert attention from the swath of destruction he leaves behind him. He isn't abusive because he's angry. He's angry because he's abusive. Is this your partner? Abuser types. Mr. Sensitive. The central attitudes driving Mr. Sensitive are, well, I'm against the macho men, so I couldn't be abusive, okay? As long as I use a lot of psychobabble, no one is going to believe I'm mistreating you. I can control you by analyzing how your mind and emotions work and what your issues are from childhood, okay? I can get inside your head whether you want me there or not. Nothing in this world is more important than my feelings. Women should be grateful to me for not being like those other men, okay? Is this your partner? Abuser types. Rambo. The central attitudes driving Rambo are, strength and aggressiveness are good. Compassion and conflict resolution are bad. Anything that could even be remotely associated with homosexuality, including walking away from possible violence or showing any fear or grief, has to be avoided at any cost. Femaleness and femininity, which he associates with homosexuality, are inferior. Women are here to serve men and be protected by them. Men should never hit women because it is unmanly to do so. However, exceptions to this rule can be made for my own partner if her behavior is bad enough. Men need to keep their women in line. You are a thing that belongs to me, akin to a trophy. Is this your partner? Abuser types. The terrorist. The central attitudes driving the terrorist are, you have no right to defy me or leave me. Your life is in my hands. Women are evil and have to be kept terrorized to prevent that evil from coming forth. I would rather die than accept your right to independence. The children are one of the best tools I can use to make you fearful. Seeing you terrified is exciting and satisfying. Is this your partner? Abuser types. The victim. The central attitudes driving the victim are, everybody has done me wrong, especially the women I've been involved with. Poor me. When you accuse me of being abusive, you're joining the parade of people who have been cruel and unfair to me. It proves you're just like the rest. It's justifiable for me to do to you whatever I feel you're doing to me, and even to make it quite a bit worse to make sure you get the message. Women who complain of mistreatment by men, such as relationship abuse or sexual harassment, are anti-male and out for blood. I've had it so hard that I'm not responsible for my actions. Is this your partner? Abuser types. The drill sergeant. The central attitudes driving the drill sergeant are, I need to control your every move or you will do it wrong. I know the exact way that everything should be done. Sir, yes, sir. You shouldn't have anyone else or anything else in your life besides me. I am going to watch you like a hawk and keep you from developing strength or independence. You faggot little worm piece of maggot shit. I love you more than anyone in the world, but you disgust me. You got that, Private? Is this your partner? Abuser types. The demand man. The central attitudes driving the demand man are, it's your job to do things for me, including taking care of my responsibilities if I drop the ball on them. If I'm unhappy about any aspect of my life, whether it has to do with our relationship or not, it's your fault. You should not place demands on me at all. You should be grateful for whatever I choose to give. I am above criticism. I am a very loving and giving partner. You're lucky to have me. Is this your partner? Abuser types. The player. The central attitudes driving the player are women were put on this earth to have sex with men, especially me. All right. Women who want sex are too loose, and women who refuse sex are too uptight. It's not my fault that women find me irresistible. Giggity goo. This is a word-for-word quotation from a number of my clients. It's not fair to expect me to refuse temptation when it's all around me. Women seduce me sometimes, and I can't help it. If you act like you need anything from me, I'm going to ignore you. I'm in this relationship when it's convenient for me and when I feel like it. Giggity. Women who want the non-sexual aspects of themselves appreciated are bitches. If you could meet my sexual needs, I wouldn't have to turn to other women. All right. Is this your partner? Abuser types. Mr. Right. The central attitudes driving Mr. Right are: you should be in awe of my intelligence and should look up to me intellectually. I know better than you do, even about what's good for you. Your opinions aren't worth listening to carefully or taking seriously. The fact that you sometimes disagree with me shows how sloppy your thinking is. If you would just accept that I know what's right, our relationship would go much better. Your own life would go better too. When you disagree with me about something, no matter how respectfully or meekly, that's mistreatment of me. If I put you down for long enough, someday you'll see. Is this your partner? Abuser types. The water torturer. The central attitudes driving the water torturer are: you're crazy. You fly off the handle over nothing. I can easily convince other people that you're the one who's messed up. As long as I'm calm, you can't call anything I do abusive, no matter how cruel. I know exactly how to get under your skin. Your abusive partner doesn't have a problem with his anger. He has a problem with your anger. One of the basic human rights he takes away from you is the right to be angry with him. No matter how badly he treats you, he believes that your voice shouldn't rise and your blood shouldn't boil. The privilege of rage is reserved for him alone. When your anger does jump out of you, as will happen to any abused woman from time to time, he is likely to try to jam it back down your throat as quickly as he can. Then he uses your anger against you to prove what an irrational person you are. Abuse can make you feel straitjacketed. You may develop physical or emotional reactions to swallowing your anger, such as depression, nightmares, emotional numbing, or eating and sleeping problems, which your partner may use as an excuse to belittle you further or make you feel crazy. I read that. One of the obstacles to recognizing chronic mistreatment in relationships is that most abusive men simply don't seem like abusers. They have many good qualities, including times of kindness, warmth, and humor, especially in the early period of a relationship. An abuser's friends may think the world of him. He may have a successful work life and have no problems with drugs or alcohol. He may simply not fit anyone's image of a cruel or intimidating person. So when a woman feels her relationship is spinning out of control, it is unlikely to occur to her that her partner is an abuser. It is fine to commiserate with a man about his bad experience with a previous partner, but the instant he uses her as an excuse to mistreat you, stop believing anything he tells you about that relationship and instead recognize it as a sign that he has problems with relating to women. In one important way, an abusive man works like a magician. His tricks largely rely on getting you to look off in the wrong direction, distracting your attention so that you won't notice where the real action is. He draws you into focusing on the turbulent world of his feelings to keep your eyes turned away from the true cause of his abusiveness, which lies in how he thinks. He leads you into a convoluted maze, making your relationship with him a labyrinth of twists and turns. He wants you to puzzle over him, to try to figure him out, as though he were a wonderful but broken machine for which you only need to find and fix the malfunctioning parts to bring it roaring to its full potential. His desire, though he may not admit it even to himself, is that you rack your brain in this way so that you won't notice the patterns and logic of his behavior, the consciousness behind the craziness. Physical aggression by a man towards his partner is abuse, even if it happens only once. If he raises a fist, punches a hole in the wall, throws things at you, blocks your way, restrains you, grabs, pushes, or pokes you, or threatens to hurt you, that's physical abuse. He is creating fear and using your need for physical freedom and safety as a way to control you. The abusive man's high entitlement leads him to have unfair and unreasonable expectations, so that the relationship revolves around his demands. His attitude is, you owe me. For each ounce he gives, he wants a pound in return. He wants his partner to devote herself fully to catering to him, even if it means that her own needs or her children's get neglected. You can pour all your energy into keeping your partner content, but if he has this mindset, he'll never be satisfied for long. And he will keep feeling that you are controlling him because he doesn't believe that you should set any limits on his conduct or insist that he meet his responsibilities. The symptoms of abuse are there, and the woman usually sees them. The escalating frequency of put-downs, early generosity turning more and more into selfishness, verbal explosions when he's irritated or when he doesn't get his way, her grievances constantly turned around on her so that everything is her own fault, his growing attitude that he knows what is good for her better than she does, and in many relationships, a mounting sense of fear or intimidation. But the woman can also see that her partner is a human being who can be caring and affectionate at times, and she loves him. She wants to figure out why he gets so upset so that she can help him break his pattern of ups and downs. She gets drawn into the complexities of his inner world, trying to uncover clues, moving pieces around in an attempt to solve an elaborate puzzle. An abuser can seem emotionally needy. You can get caught in a trap of catering to him, trying to fill a bottomless pit. But he's not so much needy as entitled. So no matter how much you give him, it will never be enough. He will just keep coming up with more and more demands because he believes his needs are your responsibility until you feel drained down to nothing. The abuser's mood changes are especially perplexing. He can be a different person from day to day or even hour to hour. At times he's aggressive and intimidating, his tone harsh, insults spewing from his mouth, ridicule dripping from him like oil from a drum. When he's in this mode, nothing she says seems to have any impact on him except to make him even angrier. Her side of the argument counts for nothing in his eyes, and everything is her fault. He twists her words around so that she always ends up on the defensive. As so many partners of my clients have said to me, I just can't seem to do anything right. At other moments, he sounds wounded and lost, hungering for love and for someone to take care of him. When this side of him emerges, he appears open and ready to heal. He seems to let down his guard, his hard exterior softens, and he may take on the quality of a hurt child, difficult and frustrating but lovable. Looking at him in this deflated state, his partner has trouble imagining that the abuser inside of him will ever be back. The beast that takes him over at other times seems completely unrelated to the tender person she now sees. Sooner or later, though, the shadow comes back over him as if it had a life of its own. Weeks of peace may go by, but eventually she finds herself under assault once again. Then her head spins with the arduous effort of untangling the many threads of his character, until she begins to wonder whether she is the one whose head isn't quite right. The woman knows from living with the abusive man that there are no simple answers. Friends say, he's mean, but she knows many ways in which he's been good to her. Friends say, he treats you that way because he can get away with it. I'd never let someone treat me that way. But she knows the times when she puts her foot down the most firmly, he responds by becoming his angriest and most intimidating. When she stands up to him, he makes her pay for it, sooner or later. Friends say, leave him, but she knows it won't be that easy. He will promise to change. He'll get friends and relatives to feel sorry for him and pressure her to give him another chance. He'll get severely depressed, causing her to worry whether he'll be all right. And depending on what style of abuser he is, she may know that he will become dangerous when she tries to leave him. She may even be concerned that he will try to take her children away from her, as some abusers do. Objectification is a critical reason why an abuser tends to get worse over time. As his conscience adapts to one level of cruelty or violence, he builds to the next. By depersonalizing his partner, the abuser protects himself from the natural human emotions of guilt and empathy, so that he can sleep at night with a clear conscience. He distances himself so far from her humanity that her feelings no longer count or simply cease to exist. These walls tend to grow over time, so that after a few years in a relationship, my clients can reach a point where they feel no more guilt over degrading or threatening their partners than you or I would feel after angrily kicking a stone in the driveway. In the 1890s, when Freud was in the dawn of his career, he was struck by how many of his female patients were revealing childhood incest victimization to him. Freud concluded that childhood sexual abuse was one of the major causes of emotional disturbances in adult women and wrote a brilliant and humane paper called The Etiology of Hysteria. However, rather than receiving acclaim from his colleagues for his groundbreaking insights, Freud was met with scorn. He was ridiculed for believing that men of excellent reputation, most of his patients came from upstanding homes, could be perpetrators of incest. Within a few years, Freud buckled under this heavy pressure and recanted his conclusions. In their place, he proposed the Oedipus Complex, which became the foundation of modern psychology. According to this theory, any young girl actually desires sexual contact with her father because she wants to compete with her mother to be the most special person in his life. Freud used this construct to conclude that the episodes of incestuous abuse his clients had revealed to him had never taken place. They were simply fantasies of events the women had wished for when they were children and that the women had come to believe were real. This construct started a 100-year history in the mental health field of blaming victims for the abuse perpetrated on them, and outright discrediting of women's and children's reports of mistreatment by men. Once abuse was denied in this way, the stage was set for some psychologists to take the view that any violent or sexually exploitive behaviors that couldn't be denied because they were simply too obvious should be considered mutually caused. Psychological literature is thus full of descriptions of young children who seduce adults into sexual encounters and of women whose provocative behavior causes men to become violent or sexually assaultive towards them. I wish I could say that these theories have long since lost their influence, but I can't. A psychologist who is currently one of the most influential professionals nationally in the field of custody disputes writes that women provoke men's violence by resisting their control or by attempting to leave. She promotes the Oedipus Complex theory, including the claim that girls wish for sexual contact with their fathers. In her writing, she makes the observation that young girls are often involved in mutually seductive relationships with their violent fathers, and it is on the basis of such research that some courts have set their protocols. The Freudian legacy thus remains strong. To make matters worse, everyone she talks to has a different opinion about the nature of his problem and what she should do about it. Her clergy person may tell her, "Love heals all difficulties. Give him your heart fully and he will find the Spirit of God." Her therapist speaks a different language, saying, "He triggers strong reactions in you because he reminds you of your father, and you set things off in him because of his relationship with his mother. You each need to work on not pushing each other's buttons." A recovering alcoholic friend tells her, "He's a rage addict. He controls you because he's terrified of his own fears. You need to get him into a 12-step program." Her brother may say to her, "He's a good guy. I know he loses his temper with you sometimes. He does have a short fuse, but you're no prize yourself with that mouth of yours. You two need to work it out for the good of the children." And then, to crown her increasing confusion, she may hear from her mother or her child's school teacher or her best friend, "He's mean and crazy and he'll never change. All he wants is to hurt you. Leave him now before he does something worse." All of these people are trying to help, and they're all talking about the same abuser, but he looks different from each angle of view. As I have explained in earlier chapters, abusiveness has little to do with psychological problems and everything to do with values and beliefs. Where do a boy's values about partner relationships come from? The sources are many. The most important ones include the family he grows up in, his neighborhood, the television he watches and books he reads, jokes he hears, messages that he receives from the toys he's given, and his most influential adult role models. His role models are important not just for which behaviors they exhibit to the boy, but also for which values they teach him in words and what expectations they instill in him for the future. In sum, a boy's values develop from the full range of his experiences within his culture. But whether you stay or go, the critical decision you can make is to stop letting your partner distort the lens of your life, always forcing his way into the center of the picture. You deserve to have your life be about you. You are worth it. The sense of ownership is one reason why abuse tends to get worse as relationships get more serious. The more history and commitment that develop in the couple, the more the abuser comes to think of his partner as a prized object. Possessiveness is at the core of the abuser's mindset, the spring from which all the other streams spout. On some level, he feels that he owns you and therefore he has the right to treat you as he sees fit. I am often asked whether physical aggression by women towards men, such as a slap in the face, is abuse. The answer is, it depends. Men typically experience women's shoves or slaps as annoying and infuriating rather than intimidating, so the long-term emotional effects are less damaging. It is rare to find a man who has gradually lost his freedom or self-esteem because of a woman's aggressiveness. As long as we see abusers as victims or as out-of-control monsters, they will continue getting away with ruining lives. If we want abusers to change, we will have to require them to give up the luxury of exploitation. When people conclude that anger causes abuse, they're confusing cause and effect. Ray was not abusive because he was angry. He was angry because he was abusive. Abusers carry attitudes that produce fury. Let me see. The underlying attitude comes bursting out of his words. He believes his wife is keeping something of his away from him when she doesn't want intimate contact. He sees sexual rights to a woman as akin to mineral rights to land, and he owns them. Abuse counselors say of the abusive client, when he looks at himself in the morning and sees his dirty face, he sets about washing the mirror. Abuse doesn't come from people's inability to resolve conflicts, but from one person's decision to claim a higher status than another. So while it's valuable, for example, to teach nonviolent conflict resolution skills to elementary school students, a popular initiative nowadays, such efforts contribute little by themselves to ending abuse. Teaching equality, teaching a deep respect for all human beings, these are more complicated undertakings, but they are the ones that count. Encourage the women in your life, your friends, sisters, mothers, daughters, to insist on dignity and respect and to have faith in themselves and to be proud. Expect boys and men to be respectful, kind, and responsible, and don't settle for less. Consider how challenging it is to negotiate or compromise with a man who operates on the following tenets, whether or not he ever says them out loud. 1. An argument should only last as long as my patience does. Once I've had enough, the discussion is over and it's time for you to shut up. 2. If the issue we're struggling over is important to me, I should get what I want. If you don't back off, you're wronging me. 3. I know what's best for you and for our relationship. If you continue disagreeing with me after I've made it clear which path is the right one, you're acting stupid. 4. If my control and authority seem to be slipping, I have the right to take steps to reestablish the rule of my will, including abuse if necessary. The last item on this list is the one that most distinguishes the abuser from other people. Perhaps any of us can slip into having feelings like the ones in numbers 1 through 3, but the abuser gives himself permission to take action on the basis of his beliefs. With him, the foregoing statements aren't feelings, they're closely held convictions that he uses to guide his actions. That's why they lead to so much bullying behavior. In short, the abusive mentality is the mentality of oppression. Have you ever suffered a sharp disappointment or a painful loss and found yourself looking for someone to blame? Have you, for example, ever been nasty to a store clerk when you were really upset about your job? Most people have an impulse to dump bad feelings on some undeserving person as a way to relieve, temporarily, sadness or frustration. Certain days you may know that you just have to keep an eye on yourself so as not to bite someone's head off. The abusive man doesn't bother to keep an eye on himself, however. In fact, he considers himself entitled to use his partner as a kind of human garbage dump where he can litter the ordinary pains and frustrations that life brings us. She's always an available target. She's easy to blame, since no partner is perfect. And she can't prevent him from dumping, because he will get even worse if she tries. His excuse when he jettisons his distresses onto her is that his life is unusually painful. An unacceptable rationalization even if it were true, which it generally isn't. The man's rights and the woman's rights are the same size. They have the right to have their opinions and desires respected, to have a 50% say in decision-making, to live free from verbal abuse and physical harm. Their children's rights are somewhat smaller, but substantial nonetheless. Children can't have an equal say in decisions because of their limited knowledge and experience, but they do have the right to live free from abuse and fear, to be treated with respect, and to have their voices heard on all issues that concern them. Let's see. Outside of my professional life, I have known many couples over the years who had passion and electricity between them and who treated each other well. But unfortunately, there's a wide acceptance in our society of the unhealthy notion that passion and aggression are interwoven, and that cruel verbal exchanges and bomb-like explosions are the price you pay for a relationship that's exciting, deep, and sexy. Popular romantic movies and soap operas sometimes reinforce this image. Your happiness in a relationship depends greatly on your ability to get your needs heard and taken seriously. If these decisions are taken over by an abusive or controlling partner, you experience disappointment after disappointment, the constant sacrificing of your needs. He, on the other hand, enjoys the luxury of a relationship where he rarely has to compromise, gets to do the things he enjoys, and skips the rest. He shows off his generosity when the stakes are low, so that friends will see what a swell guy he is. Each human being deals with hurt or resentment in a unique way. When you feel insulted or bullied, you may reach for a chocolate bar. In the same circumstance, I might burst into tears. Another person may put his or her feelings quickly into words, confronting the mistreatment directly. Although our feelings can influence how we wish to act, our choices of how to behave are ultimately determined more by our attitudes and our habits. We respond to our emotional wounds based on what we believe about ourselves, how we think about the person who has hurt us, and how we perceive the world. Only in people who are severely traumatized or who have major mental illnesses is behavior governed by feelings. And only a tiny percentage of abusive men have these kinds of severe psychological problems. Abuse counselors say of the abusive client, when he looks at himself in the mirror and sees his dirty face, he sets about washing the mirror. In other words, he becomes upset and accusatory when his partner exhibits the predictable effects of chronic mistreatment, and then he adds insult to injury by ridiculing her for feeling hurt by him. He even uses her emotional injuries as excuses to mistreat her further. Have you ever noticed that people sometimes quit a job soon after returning from a vacation? We all have a higher tolerance for frustrating or unhealthy situations in our lives when they are constant, but when we get a little time away and then come back, that taste of freedom changes our perspective. What had been a dull ache turns into a sharp pain and becomes unbearable. Resistance never disappears. It waits in the shadows, sometimes for many years, and then eventually sprouts again. You may have gone through dark times when you felt, I just can't fight this anymore, I give up. Yet you rebound after a while to try again to recover your rights, and one day you will succeed. Are you afraid of him? Are you getting distant from family or friends because he makes those relationships difficult? Is your level of energy and motivation declining, or do you feel depressed? Is your self-opinion declining so that you're always fighting to be good enough and to prove yourself? Do you find yourself constantly preoccupied with the relationship and how to fix it? Do you feel like you can't do anything right? Do you feel like the problems in your relationship are all your fault? Do you repeatedly leave arguments feeling like you've been messed with but can't figure out exactly why? I wish I could somehow recover all those years I wasted waiting around for him to deal with his issues. Save yourself that sadness if you can by insisting on nothing less than complete respect. Never believe a man's claim that he has to harm his partner in order to protect her. Only abusers think this way. Besides knowing all about the world, Mr. Right is also an expert on your life and how you should live it. He has the answers to your conflicts at work, how you should spend your time, and how you should raise your children. He's especially knowledgeable about your faults, and he likes to inventory what is wrong with you, as if tearing you down were the only way to improve you. For decades, many therapists have been attempting to help abusive men change by guiding them in identifying and expressing feelings. Alas, this well-meaning but misguided approach actually feeds the abuser's selfish focus on himself, which is an important force driving his abusiveness. When we hear these kinds of excuses from a drunk We assume they are exactly that, excuses. We don't consider an active alcoholic a reliable source of insight. So why should we let an angry and controlling man be the authority on partner abuse? Oppressive systems stay in existence because the people in power enjoy the luxury of their position and become unwilling to give up the privileges they win through taking advantage of other people and keeping them down. In short, the abusive mentality is the mentality of oppression. Abuse is the product of a mentality that excuses and condones bullying and exploitation, that promotes superiority and disrespect, and that casts responsibility onto the oppressed. Research indicates that a woman's intuitive sense of whether or not her partner will be violent toward her is a substantially more accurate predictor of future violence than any other warning sign. Bringing about change in an abuser generally requires 4 elements. 1. Consequences. 2. Education. 3. Confrontation. And 4. Accountability. No woman in any of my cases has ever left a man the first time he behaved abusively, not that doing so would be wrong. By the time she moves to end her relationship, she has usually lived with years of verbal abuse and control and has requested uncountable numbers of times that her partner stop cutting her down or frightening her. In most cases, she also has requested that he stop drinking, or go to counseling, or talk to a clergy person, or take some other step to get help. She has usually left him a few times, or at least started to leave, and then gotten back together with him. Don't any of these actions on her part count as demonstrating her commitment? Has she ever done enough and gained the right to protect herself? In the abuser's mind, the answer is no. Once again, the abuser's double standards rule the day. Most abusive men put on a charming face for their communities, creating a sharp split between their public image and their private treatment of women and children. He may be enraged at home but calm and smiling outside. Selfish and self-centered with you but generous and supportive with others. Domineering at home but willing to negotiate and compromise outside. Highly negative about females while on his own turf, but a vocal support of equality when anyone else is listening. Assaultive towards his partner or children, but non-violent and non-threatening with everyone else. Entitled at home, but critical of other men who disrespect or assault women. The pain of this contrast can eat away at a woman. In the morning, her partner cuts her to the quick by calling her a brainless fat cow, but a few hours later she sees him laughing with the people next door and is helping them fix their car. Later, the neighbor says to her, "Your partner's so nice. You're lucky to be with him. A lot of men wouldn't do what he does." She responds with a mumbled, "Yeah," feeling confused and tongue-tied. Back at home, she asks herself over and over again, "Why me?" Abusiveness can be thought of as a recipe that involves a consistent set of ingredients: control, entitlement, disrespect, excuses, and justifications, including victim blaming. Elements that are always present, often accompanied by physical intimidation or violence. The vast majority of women who say that they are being abused are telling the truth. I know this to be true because the abusers let their guard down with me, belying their denial. Alcohol has no biological connection to abuse or violence. Alcohol does not directly make people belligerent, aggressive, or violent. There is evidence that certain chemicals can cause violent behavior, anabolic steroids, for example, or crack cocaine, but alcohol is not among them. In the human body, alcohol is actually a depressant, a substance that rarely causes aggression. Marijuana, similarly, has no biological action connected to abusiveness. Although the typical abusive man works to maintain a positive public image, it's true that some women have abusive partners who are nasty or intimidating to everyone. How about that man? Do his problems result from mistreatment by his parents? The answer is both yes and no. It depends on which problem we're talking about. His hostility towards the human race may sprout from his cruelty in his upbringing, but he abuses women because he has an abuse problem. The two problems are related but distinct. Sometimes the more educated an abuser, the more knots he knows how to tie in a woman's brain, the better he is at getting her to blame herself, and the slicker is his ability to persuade other people she's crazy. The more socially powerful an abuser, the more powerful his abuse can be, and the more difficult it can be to escape. As a product of Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture, I'm familiar with its centuries-old tradition of hiding its abuse of women under pretty packaging. I have never seen a client make a serious effort to confront his abusiveness unless somebody required him to do the work. The abuser who truly enters counseling voluntarily, with no one holding anything over his head, quits within a few sessions unless he finds a counselor he can manipulate. Abuse is not caused by bad relationship dynamics. Although our feelings can influence how we wish to act, our choices of how to behave are ultimately determined more by our attitudes and our habits. We respond to our emotional wounds based on what we believe about ourselves, how we think about the person who has hurt us, and how we perceive the world. Only in people who are severely traumatized or who have major mental illnesses is behavior governed by feelings. And only a tiny percentage of abusive men have these kinds of severe psychological problems. A woman can feel that she is losing her mind or develop actual psychiatric symptoms if the obvious realities of her life, including abuse, are denied repeatedly by her partner. Some people may feel that I'm unrealistic to believe in a world that is free of abuse, but words like unrealistic, naive, and impractical come from voices of superiority who use them as put-downs to get people to stop thinking for themselves. Abuse does affect us all. If you haven't been involved with an abusive partner yourself, even if no woman that you love has ever suffered chronic mistreatment, the quality of your life is still dragged down, your horizons still circumscribed by the existence of abuse and the culture that drives it. The voice of abuse takes so many different forms. You can hear it each time a child's dreams are shot down by an adult who thinks he or she knows it all. It rings in the ears of anyone who has ever been ridiculed for crying. It echoes through the mind of each person who has dared to put a name to his or her own mistreatment, or to the cruelty directed towards someone else, and then has been derided with stinging words such as sissy or mama's boy or hysterical or thousands of others. One of the biggest mistakes made by people who wish to help an abused woman is to measure success by whether or not she leaves her abusive partner. If the woman feels unable or unready to end her relationship, or if she does separate for a period but then goes back to him, people who have attempted to help tend to feel that their effort failed and often channel this frustration into blaming the abused woman. A better measure of success for the person helping is how well you have respected the woman's right to run her own life, which the abusive man does not do, and how well you have helped her to think of strategies to increase her safety. If you stay focused on these goals, you will feel less frustrated as a helper and will be a more valuable resource for the woman. Abuse drives wedges between people by accident or by design. Each boy's socialization is unique. Even two siblings close in age do not learn identical values. Culture is thus transmitted on a continuum. In a culture that is fairly religious, for example, some children will grow up to be devout believers. Others will reject the faith completely, and most will fall in with the average level of religious observance for their community. Where a child will land on this continuum partly depends on how strong a set of messages he or she receives from the social environment and partly on his or her personal predispositions. The family rebel, for example, might become an atheist, while the child who is most focused on pleasing the parents might become even more religious than they are. A home where a woman is abused is a small-scale model of much larger oppressive systems that work in remarkably similar ways. Many of the excuses an abusive man uses for verbally tearing his partner to shreds are the same ones that a power-mad boss uses for humiliating his or her employees. The abusive man's ability to convince himself that his domination of you is for your own good is paralleled by the dictator who says, "People in this country are too primitive for democracy." The divide and conquer strategies used by abusers are reminiscent of a corporate head who tries to break the labor union by giving certain groups of workers favored treatment. The making of an abuser is thus not necessarily restricted to the specific values his society teaches him about men's relationships with women. Without realizing it, he may also apply attitudes and tactics from other forms of oppression that he has been exposed to as a boy or as a young adult, and that he has learned to justify or even admire. The National District Attorneys Association Bulletin reported a revealing study that was conducted on another group of destructive men, child sexual abusers. The researcher asked each man whether he himself had been sexually victimized as a child. A hefty 67% of the subjects said yes. However, the researcher then informed the men that he was going to hook them up to a lie detector test and ask them the same questions again. Affirmative answers suddenly dropped to only 29%. In other words, abusers of all varieties tend to realize the mileage they can get out of saying,
I'm abusive because the same thing was done to me.
Children do best when parents are neither overly strict nor overly permissive, providing firm structure but also allowing for dialogue, respectful conflict, and compromise. In reality, to remain neutral is to collude with the abusive man, whether or not that is your goal. If you're aware of chronic or severe mistreatment and don't speak out against it, your silence communicates implicitly that you see nothing unacceptable taking place. The U.S. Surgeon General has declared that attacks by male partners are the #1 cause of injury to women between the ages of 15 and 44. One-on-one approaches to overcoming abuse work well only when the wider community pulls together to create an environment in which the victims are supported and the abusers held accountable. Some people feel threatened by the concept that abuse is a solvable problem because if it is, there's no excuse for not solving it. I can't solve his problems and it's not my fault that he thinks I should. An abuser tries to keep everyone focused on how he feels so that they won't focus on how he thinks. Because perhaps on some level he is aware that if you grasp the true nature of his problem, you'll begin to escape his domination. A man's beliefs about the effects of the substance will largely be borne out. If he believes alcohol can make him aggressive, it will, as research has shown. On the other hand, if he doesn't attribute violence-causing powers to substances, he's unlikely to become aggressive even when severely intoxicated.